Claire, thank you very much for joining us on the show to discuss this very important matter. I'm hoping we can... there she is. There you are, Claire. Interesting what the pastor had to say there, because this legislation is supposed to protect religious minorities, supposed to protect religion as one of its identifying characteristics. But actually, he's saying it could actually vilify the Christian message. It could be weaponised, this legislation, to attack the church.
Well, you can imagine that even, you might say you formally protect a religion, but if somebody's views on, for example, I don't know, gay marriage or something of that or even sex before marriage, they're saying it because they're Christian, but they don't say it in the guise of being religious. If somebody said that, they're not going to be protected, are they? They're going to be accused of stirring up hate speech in a particular way. And I think, by the way, I think we need to take a step back, because we're all assuming that the problem is that you can be harmed by this speech. And my argument is that you aren't actually harmed by somebody else's speech. It might hurt your feelings, but it's not harm in any substantive way. What's changed in recent years is that we're starting to associate speech the same as an action, as though it's an act of violence. And so, as far as I'm concerned, anyone should be able to say anything they want. People might find it hurtful or offensive, but it's not actually creating harm in the way that is implied by this legislation.
It's the reverse of sticks and stones, eh?
Yes, it's words of violence. But, of course, there's a new penalty created as a result of this act, stirring up hatred. I suppose it's trying to sort of follow in the footsteps of inciting violence, stirring up hatred. I suppose it's quite a malleable phrase, and I suppose this is why it's taken so many years for this bill, as it was passed a couple of years ago, to finally become an act. We've been talking about this information campaign, The Hate Monster, that is this sort of cartoon trying to explain to people what hatred is. We're looking at it right here, a very curious campaign. I just wonder if such a campaign is necessary. Do people really understand what's going on and what the implications of this act could be?
Well, first of all, on the hate monster, it indicates just how patronising the Scottish government are, because they're talking to their own citizens as though they're children. You be careful of what you say. There's a hate monster on every shoulder. I mean, how old do they think their citizens are? It's ridiculous. That's the first thing. Secondly, on your stirring up point, I think that people are only beginning to grasp the implications of this. But I think that one of the people that was interviewed very rightly in the news that you just had on, very rightly said this is a snitch's charter. Because stirring up, on the one hand, is something that you'd want. I want politics to be stirred up. I think it's important that we're able to... Stirring up effectively means persuading people. It means creating a response in someone. And, for example, I might want to stir up hatred against Islamism. But you can imagine that if I was to do that, that somebody could say, a third party could then say, she's stirring up hatred, and that could be perceived to be against Muslims, which it isn't. And then they could go into one of the numerous places that have been identified where you can go and report anonymously something that someone else said. And there's a joke that one of the places that they've set up as a reporting booth is in a sex shop, so God knows what they've got in mind there. But there's a mushroom farm, various other mad places, but they're encouraging people to spy on each other, to go and report what people are saying in the pub, saying at home over dinner. Emily, you said, maybe you've got an elderly relative who's a bit backward, but let me assure you, you don't have to be backward. You could be saying something completely legitimate in the privacy of your own home that somebody else would perceive as stirring up hatred, and that could get you into trouble with the with the correct police,
Claire,
and you can be arrested.
Just very quickly, because unfortunately we're running out of time. We could talk about this all day. The president of the Association of Scottish Police, he's come out warning against the practical difficulties of this type of legislation. The waste of police time when they should be going after what some people would call real crimes. The fact that it might be weaponised by fringe activists online. That the Police Scotland have already committed to investigating every single complaint of this type. This is going to be awful for the police too.
It's disastrous for policing by consent. It actually, I heard somebody from the Scottish Government interviewed earlier today who said, oh, well, it will be up to the police to decide whether that's, you know, an offence or not. In other words, completely disowning the legislation, but also giving a huge amount of power to the police to make those subjective decisions as to what's an offence or not. And we've seen the nonsense on the streets of cities where they say, oh, we saw a swastika, we're not sure if that's in the context offensive. That was at the weekend. We don't know what jihad means. So there's going to be two-tier policing, because they'll be making decisions of this order where they'll say, oh, we've decided that's not stirring up offence, this is stirring up offence. And if I could just get one final thing in, don't let's say, why aren't women in this bill? We want women in this bill. I can assure you now, I do not need the protection of this bill. And in fact, I dread the misogyny hate crime bill that the Scottish Government's going to bring. So I want less people in this bill. I don't want to start adding more to them.
I agree with you, Claire.
It's a fair point. It is just a curious omission if you're going to go through all of that. It seems like there's a relative inconsistency there. Claire Fox, of course, founder of the Academy of Ideas and a member of the House of Lords. Really appreciate your time.